Like the kind of the doghouse.
In a week or so, Teofimo Lopez will take on Josh Taylor at Madison Square Garden for the WBO Super Lightweight title, and it's a fight that really should be, I think, a lot bigger than it's been billed as. I think the whole fight, really, if you look at it, Josh Taylor, former undisputed champion at 140 pounds. Teofimo, despite not really being a officially undisputed champion, was essentially undisputed. Let's be honest, it was just due to the little thing with the WBC making the franchise belt and putting Lomachenko as one, and really it should have had it should have been undisputed Teofimo when he beat Lomachenko, but the belt went to Haney. But either way, the question I have though, because I think it's an interesting narrative that's going on, has Teofimo Lopez become a little bit underrated here? Because I'm not seeing much hype for the fight, and the people, when I look at the predictions for this fight, a lot of people are talking about how they think Taylor will bully Teofimo, how Taylor will win, and Taylor's a good fighter, but I often think that Teofimo's talent has almost gone a little bit under the radar here, because he had the one loss to George Kambosos, and his performance against Sandor Martin was very, very poor. But I think there's a lot of there's a little bit of a people kind of look at Teofimo and they look at his dad and very loud and how they talk, and it almost blinds them to what Teofimo is as a fighter. And I will say, in his fight against Kambosos, yes, he fought like a lunatic and tried to take his head off, and he paid the price. However, there are a lot of things that have gone on in his personal life. There was the whole thing of the doctor saying that he shouldn't have even fought against George Kambosos. So I think a lot of people, just have this misconception of Teofimo. Now, if you look at Teofimo as a fighter, and I'll go through his amateur record here. As an amateur, according to BoxRec, which not exactly always reliable, but they are pretty good for this stuff, especially hence the where they make the name. According to BoxRec, his amateur career was 24-8, with all of his wins going to a decision, with all of his losses also going to a decision. So not a massive amateur record, but pretty decent. And then going on from his amateur record, he then obviously went to the US Olympic trials, but wasn't able to get it. And then later down the line, he obviously did represent Honduras at the 2016 Summer Olympics. Eventually lost, but there's a lot of pedigree with all these things. The Olympic trials, going to the Olympics, and then as a pro, his record, obviously as it stands today, is 18 wins, 13 KOs, and 1 loss. That 1 loss obviously being the George Kambosos fight. And when I look at Teofimo as a fighter, you look through his record. So most notable names obviously are the likes of Lomachenko, but then you got Nakatani, who also fought Lomachenko. You got Richard Comey, which Teofimo knocked out. And I even look at the Kambosos fight, even though he didn't fight, well, he did lose the fight, he was able to put Kambosos down at a point. And again, Devin Haney, we all know he's not a knockout artist in general, but wasn't really able to put much of a dent in Kambosos. He schooled him and pretty much washed him, won every single round, but he again wasn't able to knock him out, wasn't able to stop him or even knock him down. And it shows, Teofimo has got dynamite in his hands. And I've often said, I felt with the biggest sort of knockout artist in boxing today, you got Tank, you got Deontay Wilder. People, for some reason, don't really mention Teofimo, but when you look at what Teofimo does to people, it's as if they've been paralyzed, like he ices them, electrocutes them almost. It's like you look at his knockouts, it's scary what he does to people, and I think it's as if he's almost gone under the radar now. And if you actually look what Teofimo is, if you even look at his age, Teofimo Lopez is only 25. He is very young in his career, and when you consider how young he was when he beat Lomachenko and how exciting this guy is to fight, I to watch even, I don't know why he isn't bigger than he kind of is at the moment, and why he doesn't get that respect yet. And I get his actions aren't great, and again, he hasn't performed greatly. Maybe you could argue his dad maybe is hurting his career, and maybe even his image a little bit, but I don't know. I don't feel like Teofimo, as much as people kind of can see the talent, they almost don't recognize it to the fullest extent, I think. And because of that, when you look at him, it's almost as if people use their image of him and almost talk about his fighting skills in that same way. And, you look at how he fought against Lomachenko, for example. Nobody had done that to Lomachenko. And Lomachenko talks about, he had the shoulder injury and that's why he lost. But let's be honest with you, right? Lomachenko, yeah, right, he might have had an injury, but the reason Lomachenko did not do anything for 12 rounds or for 6 rounds and then the last 6 he turned up was because he was afraid of Teo's power and he knew, keep it real, like, if he got hit the way he was getting hit in the Devin Haney fight, he would have gone to sleep, and that's why I think he fought very cautiously. He was trying to sort of download the data and kind of work Teofimo out. And Teofimo, you look at his physically, he's a very, very big fighter. You look at his back, it's very broad, and that you can kind of tell that's where all the where all the power comes from. And when I look at him, he's not just a power punch. He's a very slick boxer. He's somebody who can fight off the back foot, fight off the front foot. His problem, I think, is that he gets too overzealous and he goes searching for a knockout too much. And you don't search for a knockout. The knockout usually comes to you. You look at a lot of Teofimo's knockouts. Look at Richard Comey, for example. It wasn't as if he just swung at Comey and caught him. Comey came to him and he was able to catch him. You look at, I forget his opponent, but an opponent that is actually on my intro where he knocks him out with a left hook. He waits, he measures, and then he finds the opening. I think Teofimo really could do with exercising a lot more patience in his fights, but that's neither here nor there. I think Teofimo is becoming quite underrated by a lot of boxing fans. When people talk about, some of the best young fighters in boxing, and people don't really mention Teofimo, and I think at 140, Devin Haney's talking about going up, and I need to see Devin Haney up against a power puncher, because that's the one thing he's not had in his career yet, and him and Teofimo was the fight. I'm not going to blame Haney or Teo for that. I don't know why it didn't happen, but Teofimo against Haney would have been so intriguing because we all know the power that Lopez has, and Haney, he's not exactly the best at receiving punishment, so I think there's a lot of intrigue in that fight, and Haney's talking about going up and fighting Progress, so I think there's definitely I think that fight could happen in the future. But in fighting Josh Taylor, though, I think a lot of people seem to almost be discarding, I think, Teofimo a little bit too much, and people, I think, forget the talent that Teofimo Lopez has. There's not many people who, I think, I'm not saying he's the same, but he reminds me a lot of Anthony Yarde. There's not many people who have a relatively, not the longest amateur career, and also don't really, how many people you see who have got the power of Teofimo but can box as well as he can. And it's the same thing Anthony Yarde. I used to say about Anthony Yarde, yeah, he may not be his boxing IQ, maybe he can do little things that are better. Maybe Tunde Ajayi could maybe give him better instructions at times, but ultimately, you look at what Anthony Yarde is for a guy who didn't have a great amateur record, or a long amateur record, I should say. He is somebody who is a vicious, he can hit you and you go to sleep. We've seen this with Lyndon Arthur, Kovalev felt it, and even Beterbiev felt it. You consider how good of a boxer he also is. He's very slick. He doesn't show it, but I think he's a lot more harder to hit than what he could be at times. I think sometimes he wants to go to war a little bit too much, but he gives the likes of Boatsi and others, Callum Smith, all kinds of problems. And I look at guys like that, and I think they're such a rarity because you've got the athleticism, you have the power, but you also have the skill, and those things are a very, very good combination. And this is why I think that Teofimo isn't really getting that credit yet. Admittedly, he hasn't looked great in his last few, but I still think there is a lot there with Teofimo Lopez, and the narrative is really about his father, and people think that his dad is kind of holding him back, but I still think that I know maybe it wasn't all him, but his dad was still there in the corner when he beat Lomachenko, and he deserves credit for that. And I look at Teofimo, again, power in both hands, very skilled, can fight off the back foot. He tries at times to be a little bit too slick with the shoulder roll and stuff like that, but a guy who knows how to cut off the ring, and a guy who, let's not get twisted, I look at the likes of a Tank, I look at the likes of Ryan Garcia, Haney, I know Shakur Stevenson's just come into the division, but even a guy like Shakur Stevenson, would you really want to fight a guy like Teofimo stylistically? And I think that Teofimo before Lomachenko was a very, very big problem. And, you look at him, even like after fights doing backflips. Again, it shows the athleticism. And having the physical talent is one thing, but then you mix it with a lot of the boxing fundamentals. It creates a very, very horrible fighter for anybody to come up against. And I look at Teofimo. I think the only thing that will hold him back is his mental side. Is if he has too much stuff going on, if his life is a bit rough. But if he's in a good place, happy place, I think Teofimo is one of the best and one of the most exciting boxers to watch. He's one of the best boxers, I think, in the 140-pound division without even winning a world title. So I think that Teofimo definitely has a lot to give, and I think him against Josh Taylor is very intriguing. I'll do the obviously the preview closer to the fight, but I haven't really thought about. Well, I haven't thought about it. I haven't really picked a side yet. I'm still yet to sort of come to that. I watching a lot of their fights. Taylor, I did a video of the Jack Cattrall fight, and I wasn't happy with that. And again, Taylor's not looked good, but neither is Teofimo. So this is an intriguing fight. But Madison Square Garden, the WBO lightweight title, two former champions. I mean, Taylor is still a WBO champion, but essentially two champions who are 1 point, dominant, and we could look at them up there in the pound for pound list. And as you say, Taylor still hasn't lost. He didn't lose to Jack Cattrall, even though he did, and should have got the Cattrall should have got the win. He's still undefeated technically, Josh Taylor, and when you look at Teofimo, yeah, he lost to Kambosos, but let's not get twisted. The Kambosos was a big shot. Nobody thought Kambosos was going to perform like that, and I don't think anybody thought Teofimo would be so, knockout crazy. And so he was really searching for that knockout, and he was looking for it. And when he, you see the first round, Teofimo, the first punch he pretty much throws is an overhand right. That shows you he's not here to just soften him up and wait. He went for the knockout. And Kambosos, whilst I don't think he's fantastic, I do think there are certain attributes he has, like the speed, the timing, and somebody who will, I won't say he has crazy power, but he has enough power to get your attention. And I think you saw that in the fight. And if I look at Teofimo, he also got bloodied up in that fight. He maybe was a little bit, I don't want to say delusional, but I feel like he thought he won that fight. I don't think many people would really look at it that way. And it's as if he's still running with this narrative that he's been wronged. And maybe he's right in some regards. I'm not sure. But again, people I feel will use what he says and almost use that against his fighting ability. You kind of have to separate what a man says and what his skill actually is. This is why, look at a guy like Rolly Romero. He is, I'll say this, very entertaining to listen to. And when you look at someone like Romero, again, his last fight was a crazy result due to the very poor stoppage. But one thing I say, you got to look at him as a fighter and him as almost a personality is separate. And I think people can never do this in boxing. And this is why I think some people, Ryan Garcia, I don't know why he was betting with Errol Spence that Rolly was going to do anything to Tank, because you saw in the fight, Tank, it wasn't, Rolly Romero had moments, but it wasn't a particularly fight where you thought, it wasn't a fight where I felt Tank was really in trouble. And because his personality is so outgoing in Romero, it exudes someone who has a lot of confidence. And I just think people tend to mix the two. Just because a guy's talking confident, that doesn't mean his skills can back it up. And with Teofimo, he says a lot of things that can frustrate you and maybe come across as delusional. He felt as if, he had beaten Kambosos, where I don't think many would agree he did. He kept talking about how he, with Lomachenko, when he beat Lomachenko, talking about how he was undisputed, and he kept talking about that, even though technically he wasn't. But it was, again, it was. Well, it wasn't technically. Well, actually, I say technically he wasn't. He wasn't undisputed. He didn't have the WBC belt, but because of, like we said, the rulings, I often say he did kind of get robbed out being undisputed in that fight. But he wasn't undisputed, and he keeps talking about it. And this is what I'm saying. He talks about a lot of these stuff, and maybe he can be delusional at times, but ultimately you can't deny there is a very, very talented fighter there. And I'm not talking about your average talent. I'm talking about somebody who's extremely talented, and 25, he's still very young in his career. I think Teofimo Lopez can go very far in this sport if he just keeps his mind right. If you do that, I don't see any reason why he can't go on to be undisputed at 140 and go up to 147 and do something. I'd love to see him. He's already sparred with Boots Ennis, and I think I could see him in that picture with the likes of Ortiz at Ennis. If Conor Ben comes back, I could see him in there. You know, I could see him against the likes of Tank and Shakur, Stevenson and Haney and all these other guys. I think because he's gone to 140, he's kind of gone out of that picture a little bit. You know, now people talk about Haney and Tank and Shakur. Garcia, because he lost now, they don't really talk about him as much, which is a shame because Ryan Garcia is still a very good fighter. But, you know, he was almost, when he went up to 140 and when he lost to Kambosos, he was almost excluded from that. And I think if I were to put Teofimo in that list after Shakur's, Haney, Tank, Ryan, personally, I'd say he's better than Haney, and I think he's better fighter than Ryan Garcia. Is Shakur and Tank is where you put it, and honestly, ability-wise, I know it might seem crazy. I don't think there's actually much between him and Tank. I think Shakur's a different level. I said this before, but you know, Tank, he's as elite as Tank is. He's very smart. He's an excellent puncher, but you know, there's mistakes he does make, and you saw this in the Garcia fight. He was a little bit uncomfortable at a point, but obviously, not every fighter is going to be perfect. I understand this, but I just think that I don't think there's a lot between Teofimo and Tank. Is my point, and I'd love to see that as a fight, to be honest, because it would be a very intriguing fight. But against some of these other guys, I think you've got to give Teofimo an edge against Garcia, and against Haney, I think he would cause him a lot of problems. Shakur, I'd have to see how Shakur settles into the weight class at 135 before I say, because you know there could be Tef being too big, or maybe Shakur would just be too much from, I don't know. But I definitely think Teofimo belongs in that class. I know he's at 140, so that's why they don't really speak about it. But all of those guys are going to be fine at 140, I think. Tank already has fought at 140. I mean, Ryan Garcia now is going to commit to 140. Henny's talking about going up to like pro grade. And Shakur Stevenson spoke about going up to 140. So I think there's a lot of guys who are going to end up being in that weight class. I think it's almost as if they're all moving up together. And I think Teofimo's the first guy to really go up to 140, and I do feel he's more settled in the weight class. And I think, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if he's undisputed again, Teofimo, is what I'm trying to say. Him and Cattrall is an interesting fight, and I think, yeah, I just think he causes problems for a lot of guys. Ramirez as well. There's a lot of guys at 140, Richard Prograis, or Prograis. I don't know how he does against, you know, some of these guys, to be honest with you, because a lot of them are very tricky, but against the likes of Josh Taylor, Cattrall, guys who are good, but I think Teofimo's almost got the X factor, which I believe not a lot of these guys have. But either way, intriguing to see how Teofimo Lopez's career goes. You know, the takeover, as he calls himself, I think he definitely has the ability to recreate what he did at 135 at 140, and I do think, whilst some people do acknowledge his talent, I do think he's going slightly under the radar and becoming to be slightly underrated in my opinion. But be intriguing to see what happens between Josh Taylor and Teofimo at Madison Square Garden in a week or so. So yeah, just my thoughts on Teofimo Lopez, and until next time.